Welcome to the Market Mystics Podcast. I'm Joshua.
I'm Kim. Let's dive in. Hey, everybody. Did you know that it is one of our favorite things when we get comments on our videos?
It's true.
Or when
No
we
matter
get
what the
interaction?
comment is.
That is true. It is kind of no matter what the comment is. We
But
really...
we do love thoughtful ones.
Yes, and we do love loving ones.
It's true.
Go figure. But we got a comment on kind of an older video today.
Yeah.
Today being the day that we're recording.
Yeah.
And we discussed it and thought it would be good to kind of talk about that. Josh, do you have that comment pulled up?
I do. So it says, it's on a video that we recorded with Tommy Miller shortly after his book Transfigured came out, which was a follow-up to his book Deathless, which Kim is holding up right now.
That video, it's the book I'm holding up right now.
Yeah. It's a great book. He's been on our show once, twice, maybe just once. But we really enjoyed the conversation with him. He's a really fun person. So the comment is on that video, and the comment says, "I'm not disagreeing. I'm just trying to get understanding. If this is God's ideal plan, then no one dies. What happens to Earth's overpopulation? Just asking." And I think that's a super valid question to ask. And so we just wanted to have a conversation about like Earth's overpopulation, and what that might mean if extremely long life in a human body is God's ideal plan.
I have so many thoughts on this and I don't know where to start. I'm going to start with complete jest. What you do is you have something like a big tech person who has a foundation with an ex-wife who wants to control Earth's population, and you have them release all kinds of pharmaceuticals to do that. I said no names, but I'm also just really kidding.
No names. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm just kidding. I'm like 100% kidding about that. I do have other opinions though. Josh, do you want to share something you're thinking on this?
Yeah. So my first thought went to I guess, two places. One, I am fully on board with us being an interplanetary species. And so while Earth has limited space, just, at some point, if no one ever died, who knows when that would be, but at some point there would be no room to stand. Like, that's the logical progression of that line of thought. But I don't know how real it is, but I think that the human capacity to create something in a time of like, this needs to happen or else, like, I think we can do amazing things. And I think we could figure out how to be interplanetary. So that's my first thought, is like, we have the whole cosmos, and yes, it's not readily apparent how we would make that happen or how we would survive. But I think under the right circumstances, we would figure it out relatively quickly. I just do. I just think that that's possible, and I think we could do it. The other thought that instantly came to my mind is, I think the Earth could support significantly more people than it currently has, if we learned to govern it better. So if we learn to move to more sustainable ways of farming and raising animals, and if we move to a more sustainable way of just consumption, uh, I think the Earth could hold a lot more. So, like, roughly at the moment, the Earth has 8 billion people. Like, that's the estimated number of people on the Earth. However, there's been lots of studies done. There was a meta analysis of a study that was done in 2004.
When you say meta, do you mean like broad picture, or do
Not
you mean
Facebook.
meta
I
the
mean
company?
I mean broad
Okay.
picture. It was a meta analysis of 69 different studies,
Okay.
um, that found that the Earth could potentially support up to 98 billion people. So 10, 11 times increase of where we are now, 12 times increase of where we are now. However, there's other reports that have been done that are significantly less. There's some that are like less than a billion people. Um, and I think a lot of that has to do with how we govern resources, um, because that has a direct impact on how um, how we support a civilization. Um, and I think like a big like yeah, I think a big part of that is food. Like, obviously that's a key thing to survive. Um, so our current way of farming and producing meat and things isn't overly sustainable, which is why I think some of the models show we need less people. Um, However, it's also estimated that in the US we waste 30 to 40% of food. And so if we just simply, one, weren't a land of as much excess and a land of as much waste, with our current system, we could support at least 30 to 40% more just based on what we waste. Um, and so, like, I think just from like a foundational point of view, like, Uh, does it make sense the way we currently do things to have double the people? No, it probably doesn't. But could it if we just learn to do things a little better? Yeah, I think so. Um, Also, for me, like, and this is like the other two are like practical things. This one's like a spiritual thing. If the ideal is like the Enoch and Elijah like concept of like keeping their bodies, or Jesus like keeping their bodies and going to heaven, or being able to be here like Methuselah for almost 1,000 years. um, like I think the what that story tells you is that it's not that life has to be forever on the earth, but that you get to choose when it's time for you to go somewhere else. Like, I think that's a big thing that I take away from the immortality, extremely long life conversation is, um, like in Tommy's book, Deathless, it's like the death of death. Like, death doesn't have a hold. I get to choose, like Jesus, where he's like no man can take my life unless I give it. Like, he was fully empowered to choose, and I think that to me is more what I am pursuing, is the ability to choose.
Yeah, I was going to go, I guess, first spiritual as well. And I guess what I thought initially, without trying to be funny in any way, was I do believe that this is the ideal that God has for us.
Mm.
Um, I think it was the ideal in the beginning, in the very beginning, um, of creation. And I think it became the ideal post Jesus or post Yeshua.
Yeah.
How have we done at walking in that? Not great.
Not super
But
great.
do I think that because for 2000 years we haven't seen it um, done well, that it's
Mm-hmm.
revoked and no longer available? I don't. I think we're working toward it. Um, Sadly, I would think it would be a little easier because Jesus, like, he like paved the way, and we're like, wow, what are those bricks in the road? Let's look at those. They're so pretty, without actually following in his example.
Sure.
Um, so I think that yes, it's the ideal, but I also think it is the individual's choice. Kind of like what you were talking about. There are people who choose death. They choose that that is the end to their time on this earth, and they get that choice. Um, so I guess what I'm getting at is, though I think it's the ideal, and I think more people are realizing that and starting to step into that. Um, I don't see anywhere near the majority of the population doing that,
Mm,
or even like considering the subject
right.
at this point. And when we do get there, when we do reach the ideal, I mean, you can call me a heretic if you want, but I think that's when we start seeing the new heaven and the new earth.
Yeah.
And so if we start walking in the ideal of what the Lord has for us, I absolutely believe that he makes the space for it. Like,
Mm,
have you ever been called to something that you feel like is so much bigger than yourself? And you're like, there's no way I could ever do this. Like, it's got, and then all of a sudden the Lord like busts it wide open, and all of a sudden it's so possible.
yeah. Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
bigger than you could ever imagine. And then there it is, like right in front of you. And I think he does that. Um, so I don't want to be impractical about it, but I'm also willing to strive for the ideal, to go for that,
Yeah.
um, and work through it with him as we go.
Yes.
Um, I also tend to wonder, because we've seen this happening more and more. I wonder if the draw and the desire and the drive to procreate will become less and less
Mm,
as that happens. Um, Also, I would say by divine inspiration from the Lord, so that it isn't to the detriment of the entire human race, but it almost self regulates. Does
yeah.
that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah. I that makes perfect sense. And I wondered that too, like, oh yeah, would we just have less babies? And I don't know. I don't know that we would have no, but maybe creation happens in a slightly different way, or yeah, like I'm not exactly sure what it would look like, but I loved your point about if we were all walking in the ideal, then the ideal would transform everything. So all of creation would come into the ideal. And so the earth would be able to support differently, and like yeah, I just think it would change with us.
Absolutely. And, but I also think in all of those things that I'm saying, I don't know that I disagree with some of the uh, hypotheses
Mm,
that you had. uh, that I disagree with that. So even with like interplanetary living, um, maybe as the population goes up, the ability to figure that out also goes up, so
mm,
that the human race can continue and thrive.
mm.
Um, so I think there's so many possibilities But I don't I don't believe that the character of God, that the character of our creator, the one who is love and whose image we were made in, I don't believe that his character is to set up an ideal that would destroy us
Mm.
or that could never be attained without destruction of the majority. I just don't, I haven't seen that in who he is. I know that throughout scripture, he has been a destroyer of things. But I will tell you, in what he's revealed to me personally of who he is so for us. And he's not about annihilating us, he is about relationship with us and walking with us. And I think the closer we get to the ideal, and I don't think just being deathless is the fullness of the ideal, but I think we talk about this all the time. It's the 4-minute mile. It's one of those barriers that
What breaks through?
needs to be cracked. Yeah. Um, and I think then that opens up even more of what we could potentially be walking in. Um, just it's all very ethereal, I feel.
Yeah. 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 I think it feels ethereal because we're not walking in the ideal, and it's really hard to fathom what it would be like. It's like we have these little tastes, and we sort of like, for me, I would say deathless is almost like interplanetary living. Like there's something in us that knows, that is drawn to it. There's something in a child that is surprised when something dies. Um, or that just knows like why that wasn't like, it's something, it's like so shocking that something died. So there's something in you innately that is like that goes against. And I also think there is a fascination with looking up at the sky and being like, I think I came from somewhere else. I think there's other places. Like I and so I think there's this fascination that is like very childlike, and we don't quite know how it would work. And so
Mm-hmm.
you have people like Elon Musk who are like, well, let's pursue Mars
Yeah.
because that seems tangible. Um, but like maybe it's not Mars, maybe it's not this galaxy, maybe it's not this solar system. Uh, but like I think there is something innately that is drawn to something bigger. And so I think both those things, like to me, kind of fit in the same bucket as like, I know there's something there, but I don't exactly know what it's going to look like when we get there.
Sure. Sure. And I also think there almost has to be a tension point to push us into that, like that breakthrough, that breaking that barrier that has kind of always been there and held you in. It's like the meniscus
Mm-hmm.
of when you overfill a water cup and there's that almost like a bubble that sits on top of the
Yeah.
liquid, and there's
Yeah.
that surface tension that hasn't broken yet to make it spill over, even though it's more than full.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah. It's
But I think
amazing.
that
Yeah.
yeah, we have to get to those places um, as a whole human race, even if it's just part of us or at the top of it, and see that and go, but if that tension was broken, we could go even further.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And, but I think that's why innovators and future thinkers are so important, because that is their whole world, thinking outside of that box.
Right.
They think outside of that meniscus. They think outside of like the spillover. They go way beyond
Mm-hmm.
so that the rest of everyone can continue to advance. And I mean, I think that's a really beautiful thing, but I think it's built in and I think it's intentional, because I don't know that we need to be limited um in who we are, what we can do, where we can live, where we can be, how we can be, um any of those things.
Yeah. Yeah. I think the realm of possibility is open, like it's endless. Possibility is endless. And I think a lot of it has to do with what we can imagine. So if we limit our imagination to um, a small world, a small population, then that's all we'll be able to find solutions for. But if we open our imaginations to an endless amount of people, we'll find solutions for an endless amount of people.
I think that's true. Um, yeah, I also tend to think some of the key really comes to when we're talking like whole populations, right? And I think that's the scale on which we're looking at this. I think some of those things that we've used to determine why we're so different and could never be alike just have to kind of go away.
Mm-hmm.
Some of those barriers, um, I think, I mean, and a lot of us feel this way. I just think that, and I keep saying this phrase, and I don't know why it's all coming out in this one episode. Like, I just think the human race is at this point. There's also this tension where we've got to just freaking unite. Like, we've got to be for one another,
Mm-hmm.
um, regardless of circumstance, upbringing, uh, color, language, origin, like any of these things that we think need to divide us, but they don't.
Yeah.
Like we've got to be able to come together and be like, no, we're all made for more than this. We're all made for bigger things than this. We are capable of the ideal. We are capable of walking this out and actually seeing this come to pass. And I don't know that I've seen unity that is even like 1/1000th of that scale.
Yeah.
I want to, big time.
Yeah. Yeah. I want to.
I do want to. Um, yeah, and I think we've seen some small solutions for increasing population. You look at places like Singapore, where, I mean, how high is the average building there?
Yeah. Teeny tiny island, a lot of people. Hong Kong is another great example.
Right. I mean, New York City is the island of Manhattan is a great example of this also. Um, so we know we can build up a bit, but I think we still need to think bigger.
Yeah. Yeah. I think so too. I, yeah, really thank you to the person who left the comment. Like I think it's a very thoughtful comment and something like, uh, it's important to have comments that and thoughts that like check other things, like to
Other
really
content.
think through. Yeah, to because it's like you can't just go anywhere without boundaries because at some point you got to be like, well, wait, this isn't working. Um, but I think what it does is open up the door to be like, okay, well, maybe it's not, but why isn't it working? What can we do about it? What's the solution? Um, and I've like stuck on this, but I loved your comment about like if we were living in the ideal, the rest of creation would follow us into the ideal. And that however that would look, um, it would it would work. I don't know how it would look, but it would work.
I think it would too. And man, I'm a broken record. I also like, I really appreciate this comment because it challenges in the best way.
Yeah.
You know, it is not like, oh, I will just listen and I will believe everything you say. And I don't actually think people do that. But to take a conversation and spur it on a little bit further and a little bit further, I think that is how we advance. This is how we get things figured out. If I sit here and I just talk and everybody always agrees with me, then how do I ever grow? You know? Or if
Yeah.
nobody ever stretches, or pulls or pushes a little bit extra. Like I love that.
Yeah.
I mean, this is 95% of our friendship.
That's true. That's true. That's very true. Well, thank you, YouTube, for your comments and for helping make this episode. I hope lots of people leave more comments this year so that we can continue to like dig deeper into the content that we have put out there.
Agreed. I might even propose that if you want to push on a subject, I would love to even bring the conversation to the Discord channel and maybe have a live conversation and talk through some of that together. You know what I mean? Like, it doesn't have to be an episode or content. I think
that conversation.
Right. Like, let's just have a conversation. That would be awesome too.
Yeah. That'd be great.
Yeah. Cool. Well, good stuff today. Thank you guys for listening. We appreciate all the ways that you think about these things too. Super cool.
Yeah, very much so.
See you next time.
Thanks for tuning in to the Market Mystics. If you are hungry for more, don't miss out on our exclusive bonus content available only to YouTube members. Demystify the world of cryptocurrency in the cryptosphere and explore everything from outrageous conspiracies to curious current events and out there spiritual musings. Nothing is off limits in Let's Get Weird. Become a channel member on YouTube to unlock these extra episodes. See you in the bonus episodes.